people need not be taken seriously in military terms. I have known men
there.
armed with nothing but
Let's
stone
get
axes
stuck
to
in
overrun
there,
a
shall
guard
we?
outpost in a sneak attack. Commissar Hendrik nodded in judicious agreement. Either that, or the first Iaxist had not enough faith in the Emperor.
Oh, good.
On hearing
My
this,
Titans are ready.
Princeps Garius looked askance at the Commissar, disdain flitting across his face.
Send
The
them off.
Adeptus Titanicus was an ancient order, predating the Ministorum, which promulgated the cult of the Emperor, and it was unique among the Imperium's fighting forces in coming under the Adeptus Mechanicus. Its officers mostly followed the Martian religion, worshipping the Emperor
I saw
as
the
the
start of
machine
this.
god
It's gone quite
and
far, and I
totality
thought I should
of all
really report
knowledge.
this.
The icons on the bridge of Garius' Titan were quite different from the holy images
So
you
anyway,
saw
let's
here.
just listen to
Text
a rabbit
sigils and
talking
arcane
about
formulae
space
overlaid
dinosaurs
the
and
Emperor's stern visage.
Titans.
In his eyes,
all that
Imperial Guard
good
commissars
gubbins.
with their emotional ranting about faith were little short of lunatics. The look on Garius' face did not go unnoticed by Captain Karlak. Surreptitiously he studied the Princeps. He was hook-nosed, a feature common among Titanicus officers, a consequence, no doubt, of the hereditary strain in the Adeptus. Privately, Karlak agreed with Colonel Costas that the mission was a trivial misuse of such extraordinary machines. He wondered if Garius and Ephraim thought so too. Not that they would ever voice such an opinion. The discipline of Titan officers was legendary. For the first time, Princeps Garius spoke, his voice dry and sardonic. There is little to go on, it seems, but no matter, we of the Adeptus, at any rate, have little to fear. Let us go down on planet and bring this business to a speedy finish. Landing a Titan was not a simple matter. This was the time when the monstrous machines were most at risk. On the bridge of Lex et Annihilato, Princeps Garius took the command seat. Beside him were his bridge officers, Tactical Officer Veridens, Weapons Moderati Knifesmith, and Chief Engineer Warriors. Down below, sweating with fear, huddled the Titan's 6 ordinary crewmen. Command had been temporarily handed to the 4-man landing and ascent crew of the transport pod, who now were seated before the command podium, which in turn was hooked through to the pod's controls. The coning plate currently showed the view outside the pod. Feet first, the Titan was lowering itself through planet ABL 1034's atmosphere. In the distance, the pod carrying Principo Non Tactica and Princeps Ephraim and his crew could be seen. Heated air flamed around it, turning the pod white hot. The Titans were to be the first to land. The Imperial Guard would arrive under their protection. Using consummate skill to keep the tall pod stable as it fell, the crew steered Lexet Annihilato towards its designated landing place. Deceleration over, they soared over a landscape of mountains, valleys and plains, interspersed with dense forests. It appeared to be a fertile world, Princeps Garius thought. No wonder it had been colonised long ago in the dark age of technology. Now it would become more than just a strategic outpost. He could see it someday becoming a productive agricultural world, perhaps later even a forge world or a hive world. He leaned close to the coning plate, with this thought in his mind, imagining how the landscape would look in the future. What in the all-knowing's name is that? The exclamation was torn from his throat. Steersman, take us back over that ridge. The pod's officer leaned back at him nervously. That will be tricky, Princeps. Take us back, I say. Although technically Garius was not in command of the Titan at this moment, the pod officer dared not defy him. Instead, he muttered to the men on either side of him. Carefully, consulting continually with one another, they eased the pod back over to the other side of the ridge and hovered. Oaths now came involuntarily from the mouths of all Garius' officers. 5 huge hulks lay toppled on their side in a broad fern-clad valley. They must have lain there for centuries, for they were rusting away, dissolving with age, riddled with holes and covered in lichen. Had they been standing, they would not have been as tall as the Warlord Titans, but they were broader, monstrous, rotund shapes. Tactical Officer Veridens gasped out shocked words. "Oh, Gargants!" It was indeed astonishing to see these mighty machines, the crude orc versions of the Titans, felled and abandoned on a primitive world. Garius looked thoughtfully on the scene. It seems the orcs have also tried to take this world at some time in the past. They were defeated. Weapons Moderate Norsemen ground out. It's hardly credible.
Yeah, pull back.
Hardly defeated by the natives, Garius told him confidently. Orcs usually end up fighting amongst themselves. In any case, we have nothing to fear. Whenever a Titan has met a Gargant, the Titan has prevailed. Gargants were best described as caricatures of Titans. In place of power bundles, they were worked by clumsy, clanking beams and cogwheels, and they were steam-driven. In place of fission reactors, banks of furnaces were fed by teams of stokers.
Right, found the
But then,
commander.
no one could build such superb machines as those of the Adeptus Titanicus. They were all thousands of years old, and even though continually repaired and renewed, they still retained the special occult qualities of the Dark Age of technology. The Adeptus Mechanicus had tried to build brand new Titans themselves, but the fruits of their efforts never performed nearly as well. Enough, Garius said shortly. On, pilot. The great pod eased itself back over the ridge. Far in the distance, Garius saw what looked like a herd of animals, but there was no time now to magnify the image. The slow thunder of the landing engine faded as the pod was lowered gently onto a plain scattered about with overturned artillery, smashed tanks, and flattened drop shuttles. This was where the second expedition had met its glistening fate, and this was where the Imperium would now finally exert its will. Planet ABL-1034 was a low-gravity planet, perfect for the operation of Titans, which originally had been designed for use on Mars. The huge pod opened up and trundled away over the moss. The Lex Et Annihilato was revealed in all its prodigious glory, roughly the shape of a man and the height of a 12-story building, bristling with armament. A kilometre away strode its match, the Principio Non Tactica. Princeps Garius smiled. Whenever he saw two Titans standing on the same landscape, twinned colossi, he felt an urge to engage in a duel, to have the machines striding towards one another with shoulder cannon blazing. He was sure that his colleague, Princeps Arthurim, on the bridge situated within the cranium of the Principio Non Tactica, felt the same. It had never been his luck to engage with a Chaos Titan, possibly the only worthy opponent of the Adeptus. But one day... The landing crew left the bridge. Chief Engineer Morians left too, descending into the body of the Warlord to rally the cowering crewmen. Now the drop shuttles were coming in, Imperial Guard detachments piling out and setting up a perimeter around the watchful Titans. More shuttles landed and disgorged Basilisk artillery, Lehman Russ tanks and Rhino armoured carriers. For the third time, planet ABL-1034 was claimed for the Imperium. For a while, the landing force would merely hold its ground, scanning the terrain from within the craniums of the warlords, waiting to see if an attack would come. If it did not, the Titans would stride out to seek the Emperor's revenge. Guardsman Lecky and Colour Sergeant Hengist were the last two left in the prisoner cage. In his tattered uniform, Osmin Lecky, smeared with mud and pale of face, stared from between the rough-hewn timbers at the Stone Age village which sprawled all around them. He had always thought of Stone Age humans as shambling and brutish, a picture reinforced by the pre-landing morale lectures, but the people he saw striding among the fern-thatched roofs were nothing like that. They were tall, muscled men, proud of bearing. There were gracious, equally proud women. There were agile, healthy children. It was he like a rock outcrop, and an impossibly long and massive tail. From where Lecky cowered, the human beings which he knew swarmed over the beast were too small to be visible. He shuddered, remembering the attack which had killed most of his comrades. Colour Sergeant Hengist squatted in a corner of the cage, his head in his hands. One thing was true about the Stone Age primitives, and that was their cruelty. There had been 50 captives in the cave to begin with. The villagers had been killing one per day, always by some different method. Their ingenuity seemed inexhaustible. While the Commissar had been alive, Lecky had been able to keep his own spirits up to some extent. The Commissar had exhorted them constantly to keep faith in the Emperor, and he had encouraged them to believe that rescue was possible. The villagers had seemed to be amused by his hectoring, though of course they could not understand it. They had kept him till nearly last. He had been killed the day before. True, it had been inspiring to witness the Commissar's grim fortitude as he was torn apart, limb by limb. Only at the very end did his torturers succeed in wringing cries of agony from him. But the spectacle had finally broken Colour Sergeant Hengist, and it had broken Guardsman Lecky too. Lecky shivered. He trembled. The Imperium was far away. The Emperor was but a word.
Not sure what good
He glanced
he's gonna
again
do,
at the
they can't
distant
attack the
Archaeosaur,
ground, but
to use the name given
it
the
will be a
beasts
laugh,
in the
though.
morale lectures. It had turned and was approaching the village. Then, a creaking sound from behind him made him turn. The cage's gate was opening. Bronze-skinned Stone Age men entered. They dragged out the
Scream for
whimpering,
my,
sobbing
troopers.
Emperor's guardsmen to face their doom.
Where's my nukes?
There was a peculiarity to planet ABL 1034.
Nuke.
Cloud formations were all of the same type, a series of evenly spaced ribs or striations high in the sky, stretching from horizon to horizon.
That's my
No one in the
nukes.
expeditionary force asked himself what produced this phenomenon. That was a task for an adept, and to the military mind, planetary peculiarities were too numerous to be worth thinking about. But as the striped cloud cover raced across the sky, it broke up the light of the hard white sun and produced a rippling effect on the ground below. Princeps Garius found the rapidly shifting light and shade eerie, but also restful. The expedition had not so far been challenged, and the officers
there's
were
my
enjoying a
cannon
meal
fodder.
in the open air. Artillery and tracked vehicles grumbled and clanked around them. It was a traditional courtesy for a Princeps to eat with the Imperial Guard officers during a combined
Let's just snipe the
operation,
enemy
though
guard
both
in
Garius and Ephraim would have preferred to be with the rest of their bridge crews, supervising a meticulous checking of their warlords. Commissar Hendrik was consulting the
Question of
Imperial
what's
Tarot.
going to survive
Reverently,
longer.
he unfolded the
The enemy
purple velvet
commander,
cloth in which the deck
who's
was
not
wrapped,
repairing,
pushed aside the remains of the
these
meal,
three
and laid out three
anti-orbitals
cards
as
to
they
form a
shoot my
triangle,
three
tapping each in
Titan.
turn.
Well, there
The
goes
surfaces of the cards glittered and swirled, flashing with
Where
colour.
you gonna run
The
to,
card at
Mr.
the
Enemy
apex of the
Commander?
triangle
Where you running?
was the significator. It was the first to clear and form an image.
Oh,
The
this
Emperor
could be
appeared,
close.
seated on a throne carved from a single gigantic diamond, glaring out
Well, you
at
won
the
this
beholder.
round.
The card on the left was the next to
Too bad you won't
stabilise.
survive the
It showed
next.
universal force, a snake with its tail in its mouth, whirling endlessly against a background of receding galaxies. The final card cleared almost immediately after it to show the galactic realm, producing one of several images by which that card manifested itself. A maiden in a flowing gown stood on a landscape, star formations in the sky at her back,
How
pouring
come there's
multicoloured
still-
liquid from two large pitchers she held,
No,
one
you don't
in each
exist.
hand. The
You're
liquid
just
flooded
a-
the landscape,
an
carrying away
aberration.
cities
You're not
and
real.
forests. The Commissar banged his fist on the table. "The meaning is clear," he intoned. "Might will prevail." "Of course," Princeps Ephraim drawled, glancing casually at the triangle of images. "What else could the cards show if they tell the truth?" "Yes, what else?" Commissar Hendrik said feverishly. "Though the images contain an ambiguity, one must judge carefully when interpreting the Emperor's tarot. True, the presence of the Emperor as significator confirms that the message relates to our current operation, but universal force does not necessarily refer to the forces of the Divine Emperor. Forces opposed to his terribilitas could be implied. Also, the galactic realm." The Commissar's eyes widened as he redirected his gaze back to the final card. The image was changing, the landscape writhing and rising up around the feet of the maiden, threatening to topple her. "Imperator Divinitas," he gasped in horror. "We are undone!"
I'm
Garius's
gonna
patience had
reassign
reached
group-
its limit.
Actually, no,
With a
I'm not
grunt
gonna
of
reassign
disgust, he swept the cards from the table. "Enough of your superstitions, faith cultist," he snarled. "True holiness is the holiness of the machine. Suggest defeat for our titans on a planet of animals, and you are ripe for reprocessing as a servitor." Commissar Hendrik leapt to his feet, fury on his face. It was not that he heard the Princeps' words as an insult to himself personally. He heard them as an insult to the Emperor. He made a sudden movement, as if reaching for his las pistol. Colonel Kostos was about to intervene, but excited shouting from the perimeter interrupted the exchange. A veteran sergeant ran up and saluted hastily. "Native war beasts advancing on the camp, Colonel!" Princeps Garius laughed, sounding like a drain emptying. "Now we see." Bring the 2 slaves
Still
forward.
some more of those.
The order was barked out by
And
the clan hetman.
nukes
He
are
stood
fun.
in the middle of
They
the village
definitely
compound, wavy blonde
let's
hair
have,
flowing down his hard
be a
muscled
bit
back,
more
a
sporty
stone
about
axe
this, shall
thrust into his belt of woven fern leaves. Colour Sergeant Hengist and Guardsman
I like the
Lecky
idea
were
of a
flung
mass
at his
mobile
feet,
infantry
where they
drop.
cringed like dogs, peering left and right. "Are not warriors!" the headman roared at the villagers who were gathered around him. "These are slaves of the giant shining men, the real warriors who have come again from the sky to do battle with us. That is why the gods gave us the defenders, to help us fight the giant shining warriors." Lecky and Hengist could not, of course, understand a syllable of what the hetman was saying. All they understood by this time was that every second they remained alive and untortured was a miracle. At the same time, the knowledge that pain and death was
Gonna
coming
need some
closer
more
second by
resources for
second
this.
struck stark fear into their souls. Lecky gibbered as he was once more wrenched to his feet. Hengist groaned with despair. And then they saw them coming. There were 2 of them, coming closer, pacing the plain one after the other, looming against the sky. Archaeosaurs. They were like mottled grey and brown mountains with massive reptilian heads on the end of long, sinuous necks. The weight balanced by enormous rippling tails as long as the bodies themselves. This was the second time they had seen such monsters. The first time was when the beast had destroyed the Imperial Guard camp. Lehman Russ tanks had been unable to stop them. Basilisk artillery had been unable to stop them. They had trampled everything, moving surprisingly quickly on their 8 sturdy legs, 4 on each side. Thicker than any tree trunk. Guardsman Lecky found it incredible, almost unimaginable, that there could be animals as huge as these. Either one of the beasts could have trampled the village to dust by merely strolling through, but instead they halted far outside its bounds, heads swaying. Despite their size, they looked placid enough for the moment. Lecky knew that really massive animals would have to be plant eaters, and there was no grass on this planet, only ferns and moss, endless fern forests and fern-covered plains. He could imagine the wide swathes the beasts would cut through such forests as they fed. With whoops and shouts, the villagers dragged Lecky and Hengist out of the village. Being sacrificed to the monsters would at least be quicker than the death suffered by many of his comrades, Lecky thought. They came nearer. Now men could be seen crawling over the vast bodies, as if on hillsides. The guardsmen could also see house-like structures erected on their backs, and, what seemed most weird, one such structure atop each massive head. The steadily flickering daylight of planet ABL 1034 gave the scene an unreal, disjointed appearance. Now, Guardsman Lecky could see how the tribesmen climbed onto the huge beasts. Rope ladders hung down from their sides and trailed over the ground. Lecky found himself at the foot of one. The tribesman mounted a rung, seized hold of Lecky by one arm and jerked him upwards. Helplessly, the young man was hauled up the ladder, soon forced to assist in the climb or fall lethal distance to the ground below. Lecky saw Colour Sergeant Hengist being dragged towards the second Archaeosaur. Once the guardsman passed the point where the ropes fell away from the beast's hide, he saw how easy it was to move about on top of the Archaeosaur. The immensely thick and tough hide was corrugated. On the lower slopes of the animal mountain, one could walk in these corrugations as though in a trough or trench. Scrambling over these, he and his captors came close to the gigantic spine, where the corrugations smoothed out somewhat, and it was like making one's way on the top of a heaped hill. Lecky now realised that the beast's hide was in fact armoured. Up here, it was like stepping on steel or adamantium. Tribesmen dotted the vast back. The hetman had made his way here already. He bellowed and gestured. Lecky was propelled forward, towards the beast's head. Even facing certain death, Lecky found time for a touch of pure curiosity about what was to happen. Certainly, this was an unusual way to die, an adventure he would have enjoyed telling to his comrades of the first Iexist. If there had been any way he could have survived it. The Archaeosaur's neck, though long, was not all that lengthy as compared with the huge body. It had, after all, only to reach ground level in order to feed, so it was little longer than the 8 comparatively stubby legs. Traversing it was like walking up a mountain trail, and there,
nuclear
set
detected.
on top of the giant reptilian head, was a square hut
It's an allied.
with a covered platform.
That's
It was
so
open
worrisome.
at the front and back, and 3 tribesmen squatted in it. Lecky got an odd feeling. It was like looking at a primitive version of the bridge of some
There we go. There's
fearsome
my
war machine.
resources.
Lecky was pushed through the hut and out the other side. In passing, he saw what at first he took to be a dozen bony spines projecting from the top of the Archaeosaur's skull. But then he realised that they were rudely shaped stone spikes hammered into the animal's head. Before he could wonder what these were for, his fate was revealed to him. Forward of the hut, also mounted on the beast's head, not far behind the eyes, stood a timber X shape. Guardsman Lecky's captors fastened him to this, limbs spread, and left him there. Lecky could hear the beast's stertorous breathing. It sounded like nothing so much as the engine of a Lehman Russ tank. Turning his head, he was soon able to see Colour Sergeant Hengist spread-eagled on an identical X-beam before the eyes of the second warbeast. So here, Guardsman Lecky was, a mascot, an emblem, a figurehead, and perhaps a taunt to the enemy. The Archaeosaurs were going into battle. Against another tribe? Or a third Imperial Guard expedition? From behind him came banging, clanking noises. The Imperial Guard officers who had faced these war beasts had been at a loss to know how the primitive tribesmen controlled them. Here was the answer, though. Lecky could not look around far enough to see it.
There you go.
The
That's
Stone Age people had lived on planet ABL 1034 for a long time, and they had learned much. The stone spikes had been driven through the Archaeosaurus skull to precise points within the tiny brain. By banging the spikes with his stone hammer and making them vibrate, the Mahout could stimulate nerve
It's not
centers.
worm riding. It's a
One
grimmer and it's
spike
darker
and the creature
than
would
worm
advance.
riding.
Another spike and it would retreat. Others and it would turn left, turn right, fly into a rage and attack. Another and it would spew fire. The hetman barked an order. The squatting Mahout banged one spike and then another. The 2 Archaeosaurs lumbered off, away from the village, towards the giant shining warriors. "Here they come," said Princeps Garius. "Ready to move out." The bridge crewmen of the Lex et Annihilato took up their positions, pulling down the control sets to link with the metal sockets set into their skulls. As commander, only Garius himself was free of such an interface. Chief Engineer Morians was most encumbered. His head almost disappeared amid a mass of pipes, tubes and leads. It was his responsibility to keep contact with the whole internal machinery of the Warlord, to supervise its running crew, and to keep everything functioning, whatever the damage. Tactical Officer Veridens would actually guide the giant battle machine, moving it like his own body at Garius's orders, with a direct neural connection to the power bundles. The Chief Engineer was also effectively blind, seeing nothing outside. Garius, Morians, and Weapons Moderate Knifesmith had access to the coning hollows. Garius looked to the right,
Wow,
where
oh
the
my
companion
nukes.
warlord Principo Non Tacticus stood, also gearing itself up to move. The Lex et Annihilato roared. Warlord Titans had the imprinted mental nature of a grizzly bear, a powerful bad-tempered animal native to Terra, and this sometimes made them difficult to handle. The Principo Non Tactica also roared. At a word from Garius, they took a gigantic step forward, carefully treading in the spaces cleared for them. A few steps more, and they were outside the camp, striding
absolute
towards
fucker.
the horizon.
You see, this is why I don't like having sub-commanders.
I had expected
I mean,
more.
I was just getting ready to do a launch.
At
and
first,
I've
it
just
was
been-
difficult
I've
to
just been
estimate the
cheeked
size of
out
the
by a fucking
Archaeosaurs as they
sniped nuke.
looked
Didn't
onwards.
even get to
It was
use
the
my
speed of
massive-
their approach,
Fuck
perhaps,
you.
that made them seem not as large as they really were.
Arseholes.
Moving with a shuffling motion on their 8 sturdy legs, they appeared to Garius's eyes scarcely larger than Terran dinosaurs. He relaxed. This should take no more than moments, after which the natives were unlikely to have any stomach for further action. Garius, as acting group commander, outranked Ephraim for the duration of the engagement. He spoke briefly into his communicator, issuing orders to his fellow princeps. Fibre bundles humming like swarms of angry hornets. Leg shanks clanging, the twin titans strode out towards their primitive challengers.
Right, let's try
And
that
then,
again.
Garius
And this
caught his
time
breath
it's
in
a boss
surprise.
fight, so there's
The
no
brief,
subcommand,
blurred
just get in my
transmission from
way.
the destroyed second expedition had not prepared him for what he now saw. The Archaeosaurs were enormous, bigger than he would have believed, remotely possible for any land animal, even taking the low gravity into account. The monster's head, when raised, reared even higher than the warlords. This was not the only comparison between the two. Behind the Titans, using them for protection like mice scurrying behind a man, came the Imperial Guard force, tanks, mobile artillery and infantry.
Yeah,
It was the
this
same
one's
on the
weird.
other side,
It's like
a ragged column of at least 1,000 nearly
ocean
naked primitives,
and lava.
armed with spears and stone axes, trailed behind the Archaeosaur, ready to take on whatever their battle beasts left behind. How did the creatures stand up? Their bones must be made of steel, he thought with incredulity, or adamantium. Still, they could not conceivably withstand the Titan's armament. He barked orders again. The warlords angled out to approach the Archaeosaurs from their flanks and get an easier target. Then their huge legs pumped faster, propelling them almost at a run. By now, Tactical Officer and Weapons Moderate had almost become a single personality, joined by the grizzly bear essence imprinted on the Lex et Annihilato. The shoulder cannon swiveled, aimed at the flank of one of the impossibly huge beasts, and opened up. A shattering noise echoed through the cranium of the Titan as a volley of shells went hurtling towards the defenceless target.
That'll be my
Disbelievingly, Princeps Garius watched as the entire volley bounced off the beast's armoured back. Some exploded in mid-air, others flew away and fell to the ground. The Archaeosaurus, however, seemed unhurt by the explosions. It lumbered round to face the Titan with its smouldering yellow eyes. Now Garius saw that what he had taken to be a fringe or crest on the creature's skull was actually an artificial structure in the form of a covered platform, and within it squatted men. Did these men manage to control the animal? If so, how?
Where?
But there was something else.
Yeah.
Set in front of the platform, an X-beam had been erected. To this, uniform torn and ragged, face covered in dirt, was a bound guardsman. Up to now, Garius's feelings for the enemy, whom he had scarcely considered an enemy, so inferior were they, had been neutral. Now his heart filled with hatred. Poor wretch, he muttered to himself. There was no way he could help the prisoner. He was sure to die along with the Archaeosaur. He put him from his mind. He doubted that Weapons Moderate Knifesmith's aim was good enough to hit the swaying head. "Aim low," he ordered. "The belly will have less armour." Again, the shoulder cannon roared with ferocious violence. This time, several shells struck home, creating a brief smokescreen. When it cleared, Garius expected to see the smashed carcass of the Archaeosaur lying on its side, twitching. He gaped with renewed astonishment to see the monster still standing. True, some of the shells had penetrated the hide and left deep gaping wounds, yet the Archaeosaur was unshaken. It was as if it did not even feel the torn flesh and flowing blood. And it was still on the move, turning to face the Titan. Garius was about to order another volley, but first he glanced towards Principo non Tactica and momentarily froze. The second Archaeosaur, also dripping blood from a cannon volley, was charging towards the warlord at a run. Suddenly, its jaws gaped wide, and from between its rows of teeth came a white-hot gout of fire, which enveloped the upper part of the Principo. To the astonished Princeps, it looked like a plasma weapon, something with which he had not thought to equip the warlords. Who would have thought to need it on a world like this? He did not know of the Archaeosaur's prodigious digestive system with its 23 stomachs, building up acetylene gases at high pressure, or of the unusual metabolism which mixed pure phosphorus into that acetylene. When the Archaeosaur belched, which it did when angry or when made to do so by a bang on the appropriate stone spike, the acetylene was squirted out and ignited by the phosphorus on contact with the air. Evolution had devised the phenomenon as a defense against predators. Now it was even more effective as a weapon. The Principo's bridge must have been completely blinded during the discharge, though the void shields would have protected the crew from the heat. But there was a second tactic to the Archaeosaur's attack. It reared up on its four hind legs. It now towered over the warlord. When Princeps Ephraim's view cleared, he saw the vast beast come crashing down on his land war machine in an attempt to topple it. "Assist Principio!" Garius shouted. "All weapons!" The Lex et Annihilato swiveled. Moderati Knifesmith let loose with both shoulder cannons and the belly lasgun. The Principo staggered back, its own belly lasgun also opening up, trying desperately to keep its footing against the monstrous weight of the angry beast. It probably would have succeeded, but the Archaeosaur had yet another trick. It turned aside, the vast tail swinging round and crashing into the body of the Titan, where the power source and main engines were located. The carapace buckled. Now a red stream obscured the view as Principo's two heavy lasguns bit into the beast and vaporized huge amounts of its blood. Through Garius's communicator came a faint voice, that of Ephraim's chief engineer. "Void shields down." Then, with utter horror, Princeps Garius saw the Principo non tactica fall, first losing its balance, unable to correct the momentum imparted by the Archaeosaur's tail, then one foot lifting off the ground. Then the huge structure descended with slow majesty in the low gravity, until it smashed into the hard earth. Once the Titan was toppled, there was virtually no chance of getting it to its feet again. Princeps Garius shrieked orders, turning his attention back to the Archaeosaur threatening the Annihilato. "The head! Aim for the head!" Alert to the fate that had overtaken the sister Titan, Veridans backed away, jinking aside to prevent the creature mounting a similar assault, even though it was clear by now that the Archaeosaurs were more agile than their bulk gave them any right to be. Shoulder cannon barked, and both missed the waving head as it turned on its sinuous neck to follow the warlord. Garius was dimly aware of the other Archaeosaur trampling the fallen Principo non tactica, rending and splitting the defenceless carapace. Briefly, the lasgun hissed out again, but it was unable to target the beast. Then Garius glimpsed a final indignity. Men were spilling out of the cracks in the casing like maggots from a festering body, and he could see what they were fleeing from, a blinding, white, ravening glow in the interior. The Warlord's fission reactor was in meltdown, its fuel elements fused together by the force of the Archaeosaur's trampling. Now Garius knew what had happened to the Gargants. Now, its business finished, the second Archaeosaur was coming to join its brother. It was frightening how the mountain of animal was still able to move with great chunks torn out of it by 4 repeated shoulder cannon and 2 heavy lasguns. It seemed the monster was unstoppable. The bones of the beast were even exposed, a lustrous grey in colour. Garius could well believe they were made of iron, or even steel. "Aim right, Moderati, aim right! Look out for the tail!" The warning came too late. The tail lashed out swifter than the eye could follow and struck the Titan on one knee. The Warlord juddered. A muffled battle report came from Chief Engineer Amorians. "Left leg disabled!" Despite himself, terror struck into Princeps Garius' soul. His Titan lost mobility. The 2 Archaeosaurs were bent on, toppling and trampling it.
Commander?
"The brain!"
Why is that not your...
"We must go for the brain!" Weapons Moderati Knifesmith did not need urging. He was still trying to target the head on which Guardsman Lecky was strapped like a sacrificial victim. It was easier as the beast came closer. With a feeling of desperation, he watched shell after shell bounce off the giant's skull. Was there any brain in it? Was it pure metal-laden bone through and through? Tactical Officer Veridans shifted the Warlord's good leg, attempting as best he could to brace the Titan against the strain that was to come. Both Archaeosaurs spewed streams of burning phosphorus actoline, temporarily blinding the bridge crew. When the white-hot fumes cleared, they faced the dreadful sight of 2 battle beasts rearing on their hind legs, blotting out the sky. Moderati Knifesman realised that everything now depended on him, and that it would all be over in the next few seconds. In an act of intense concentration, he divided his firepower. He aimed one shoulder cannon up at the lower jaw of the first Archaeosaur. At the same time, he levelled the belly lasgun and the other shoulder cannon together at the same target, one of the deep wounds in the second grievously injured animal. The hiss and racket of weapons was brief. A single shell passed through the Archaeosaur's jaw and entered the skull to explode within it and blast it to pieces. Meanwhile, both cannon shells and laser beam ate their way deep into the innards of the other beast, inflicting explosion after explosion at the centre of the massive body. The enormous spine shattered. Both beasts fell, one soundlessly, one with mangled roars to lie writhing in its death throes. Lucky neither had fallen against the warlord, Princeps Garius breathed a sigh. "Well done, Niceman." He turned to the chief engineer. "Morians, effect repairs immediately." Muffled by the mask-like neural interface, Morians replied, "Yes, Princeps." Imperial Guard units were already attacking the fleeing tribesmen, causing terrible carnage. Guardsman Osman Leckie, having fainted with terror, had died without feeling anything, and no one had heard the death scream of Colour Sergeant Hengist as he was carried falling to the ground. The fires in the village burned low that night. Women keened for their lost men, and children cried for their fathers and brothers. The new hetman spoke gravely. "We have acted with honour," he said. "We sent only 2 defenders to fight 2 giant shining warriors. Now there is only one other course of action. We must use the whole herd." "But that is dishonour," protested a young warrior, one of the few to survive. "When we fight another tribe, then there is honour," the hetman pronounced. "Beast is pitted against beast. The vanquished grants the victor tribute of grazing, tools and women, and offers battle the following year. Here there is no honour. The giant shining warriors from the sky have come to take our world. They must know they cannot." The men pondered his words, and could find no fault with them. The flickering dawn had come. The repairs to Lex et Annihilato were complete when the herd came loping over the horizon. Princeps Garius stared aghast. He had assumed from yesterday's battle that the Archaeosaurs were rare, yet here were 100 animals at least, and they were running straight for the Imperial Guard camp. He looked stony-faced at Nicemen, Viridians and Morians. Stricken, they glared back at him. Using the coning magnifier, he saw that the onrushing animals were bare of artificial structures. They were not under anyone's direct control, except for 4 or 5 managed beasts at the back, and these were driving the others on. The herd was being stampeded. There was nothing for it but to go down fighting. No officer trained by the Collegio Titanicus could do anything else, and Garius clenched his fists. "Battle stations." His order went unquestioned. All 3 bridge officers pulled down their interfaces. Klaxons sounded in the body of the Titan. The ground was shaking. An enormous pounding as though the planet was breaking up could be heard even here in the bridge. The warlord strode out to its doom. Lasgun zipping, shoulder cannon roaring until all magazines were empty. Not a single Archaeosaur was downed, but the lasgun, powered by the fission reactor, kept firing until it was destroyed. When the warlord was caught in the onrush, the press of the creature's steely flesh was so hard that it could not even fall, but was instead ground between numerous immense bodies. By the time the herd had passed, the Lex et Annihilato was smashed to fragments. Only the cranium was still intact. 20 light-years distant, the destruction of the 3rd expedition to planet ABL-1034 was evaluated almost immediately. A visual account of the initial battle, in which 1 Titan was destroyed, had been retrieved. In the final hour, Colonel Kostos of the 5th Helvetian, showing great bravery, had managed to send a shaky record of the final dreadful events. The commission was broad-ranging. Imperial Guard tactical staff officers, accompanied by the obligatory commissar, Collegio Titanicus staff officers and a priest of the Adeptus Terra sat around a varnished teak table. They had watched the visual records, including the bridge logs from the Lex et Annihilato and the Principio Non Tactica. All had been shocked to see what a people who did not even know how to smelt metal could do. "The planet cannot be abandoned," the Adeptus Terra dignitary pronounced. "It must be occupied, if only to deny it to others. What are the options?" The Collegio Titanicus officer spoke sadly. "We should not send more of our Titans against these monsters. We cannot afford such losses." The commissar, present as a representative of the Minotaurum, stirred. "The cult of the Emperor has succeeded in worse places. We can take the long approach. Infiltrate trained missionaries into the local culture. Given time, they will create a religion favourable to the Imperium. We can then move in and take over a friendly population." "No, we cannot risk it." The cry had come from the Collegio Titanicus officer. His face was pained. Don't you see? The Archaeosaurs are a direct danger to us. Our Dark Age Titans constantly decrease in number, even though slowly. None that are vanquished can be replaced, but these Archaeosaurs are animals. They breed. If they get loose into the galaxy, they can be bred without limit. What if the Orcs get hold of them? It must have been hard for a senior officer of the Adeptus Titanicus to speak so. His voice was anguished. With respect, the Commissar's plan will take too long to execute. Meantime, there is always the risk of an alien race, such as the Orcs, stepping in, learning from the natives and eventually deploying these beasts against us. We can do the same, the Commissar pointed out smoothly. The suggestion that Archaeosaurs might supplant the Adeptus Titanicus plainly horrified the Collegio officer. He shook his head vigorously. It is far too dangerous. There is only one real option. Exterminate us. Deny us use of the planet too, for centuries to come, the Commissar said. I advocate the gentler course. They pondered. And then, a shivering stillness seemed to come upon them. It was as though a ghostly presence had passed through the assembly. Several of those present looked up, softly murmuring the same word.
Let's see if I can do something with this asteroid. Maybe I can turn that into a weapon.
Tightly bound to an X-beam far above the ground, on the swaying head of a giant beast, Princeps Garius raged with shame and frustration. Colonel Kostos had been right. Primitive people were not stupid. They were bright. How by the Emperor had they ever learned to bend the Archaeosaurs to their will? Could the Adeptus Mechanicus have done any better? Could it have done as well? Garius was forced to admit the natives' cleverness and courage, but they had destroyed his beloved Annihilato. They had humiliated the Adeptus Titanicus. For that, only hatred. Half a kilometre to his right, Weaponsmith Moderati Norseman swayed atop a second battle beast. Tactical Officer Veridans was on a third beast to his left. Chief Engineer Morians was luckier. He had not survived the final fall of the Lex et Annihilato's cranium. Garius raised his face to the sky and cried out with all his soul, as though he could cast his cry through the warp. Exterminatus! He pleaded. Exterminatus! Thank you all for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. It's a bit of a weird one. Some of the laws are a bit out, for instance how Titans operate and stuff, but I think if you can forget that, it's an interesting little tale and another bit of 40k Star Trek, I suppose you'd call it, like these short stories often are. Nice little episodes in the grim dark. Please remember to like the video if you wouldn't mind, and share it if you think you've got somewhere where people would appreciate it. I'd really appreciate that if you share it. Please remember to subscribe if you're not subscribed, and hit the bell so you get notified when I am doing these kind of things and any other stuff. More videos to come. Thank you for watching, and yeah, genuinely hope you've enjoyed this. It was funny, it was good. I like this Barrington Jed Bailey. I think we're all going to enjoy Eye of Terror when I finally get to reading that. But yeah, see you again soon. Thanks for watching. Cheers.
Never fear, Kevin turns here.
Let the Galaxy Burn. Narrated by a Border Prince. Salvation by Jonathan Green. The roar of their stormbolters drowning out their battle cries, the veterans of Ultramar's First Company vented their righteous fury against the abomination that was the Tyranid race. Shrieking, the hideous elongated head of a Hormigaunt appeared in front of Brother Rios, its fanged mouth dripping with strings of saliva. Responding instinctively, Rios turned his weapon on the creature. He watched with grim satisfaction through his visor as the creature's grotesque visage disintegrated. As his stormbolter kicked in his hand, the back of the creature's skull exploded outwards in a splattering burst of purple blood and bone fragments. As another in a long line of vanquished foes fell before him, Rios found himself looking across the entirety of the vast battlefield. The rocky plains were covered with a seething mass of flesh and armoured warriors, accompanied by a host of support weapons and vehicles. To both left and right the barren plain rose up to meet steep cliff faces, above which the land bristled with a profusion of plants clustered in primeval jungles. The yellow sun shone down on the prehistoric steppes from a cloudless sky.
Build that
At any other time, the conditions could have been described as almost pleasant. Reacting automatically, Rios turned his stormbolter on an advancing brood of red-skinned termagants, pumping several rounds of armor-piercing shells into the pack before they had even mounted the outcrop. Despite the repulsing fire of the squad, several of the cunning creatures managed to infiltrate the Terminator's position. With an electrochemical surge, a flesh borer propelled its cargo of living ammunition towards its target. The veteran Space Marine, standing his ground before the milling termagants as they closed on the Ultramarines' lines. The borer beetles impacted on the warrior's Terminator armor, many splattering harmlessly against the ceramite plates. A few survived, expanding their remaining life energy and gnawing through the armor with their viciously gnashing teeth. But none of the ferocious insects made it through to the warrior within their plasteel shell. The Marine's response was to swing his free right hand, enclosed by its power fist, into the termagant's body. The creature's ribcage shattered under the blow, the fist's disruption field liquefying its internal organs. With a convulsive spasm, a spike rifle in the grip of another of the hive mind's assault troops launched a harpoon-like projectile. The barbed spike cut through the air with a hiss before embedding itself deep in the power armor of another of Rios' battle brothers. The Terminator Marine replied with a burst of fire from his assault cannon. The termagant was torn apart by a hail of shells, its ruined carcass knocked back into the genocidal horde. Despite the Terminator's valiant resistance, Rios judged that soon they would be overwhelmed. As each of the murderous aliens fell, it seemed that there were two more, all too willing to take its place. Unaffected by the grief for the death of their fellows or remorse for their actions, the inscrutable members of the hive mind were an awesome enemy indeed. When the gauntlet of Macragge had come out of the warp, the mighty starship sensors had picked up the telltale signals of a massive alien presence. Scanners quickly confirmed the presence of a hive fleet in orbit around the fourth planet in the Dakor star system. Initial long-range scans of the world had revealed it to be in a state of evolution, much like that of old Earth millions of years before the rise of man. Warm, tropical equatorial seas separated three massive continents which abounded in different environments. Great burning deserts, coastal jungles and steaming swamps, forested uplands, globe-spanning mountain ranges.
That's enough to end anybody.
A search of the Gauntlet of Macragge's library banks had revealed that this was the lost world of Jarath. According to Imperial records, the planet had been settled millennia ago by isolationists and had subsequently become cut off from the rest of the galaxy by particularly violent warp storms, which had only abated in the last 100 years. So it was that in a routine patrol of the wild eastern fringe of the Ultimar Segmentum, the flagship of the Ultramarine fleet had rediscovered Jaroth. The chapter's commander's first thoughts had been that no doubt if any of the human populace remained, their society would have reverted to one of superstitious primitivism. The secrets of the Imperium's techno-magi would be lost to them. Jarath would now be a feral world inhabited by a feral people. The presence of the Tyranid fleet decided the matter. Whatever the state of its population, Jarath was just the sort of world that the Great Devourer would relish in plundering of all life, human or otherwise. The galaxy-spanning entity that was the Tyranid race was ferocious in its appetite. Dozens of Imperial worlds had already been totally scoured of all life to provide the alien horror with raw material from which to perpetuate itself. Who knew how many hundred others had been infested by the insidious cults of the Gene Stealers, the blasphemous alien monsters working in collaboration with their corrupted human brood brethren? The Ultramarines chapter could not let another planet fall to the Great Devourer. It was their sacred duty to uphold the Emperor's laws, to defend the Imperium against the myriad menaces that threatened to engulf it from all sides. The feeding frenzy of the hive mind's children was as effective at wiping all life from the surface of a planet as the world-scouring process of the exterminatus, as a score of worlds would testify. Squad Bellator fought atop a rocky escarpment in the centre of the bleak valley, alongside the veteran squad Orpheus. Here and there, granite formations thrust up from a dried-up riverbed. Every outcrop was the scene of some conflict or other, with the bravest warriors of the Imperium fighting desperately to repel the invading alien horde. Rios, himself a veteran of Icar 4, was no stranger to the horrors of the hive mind. But no matter how many times he witnessed the foul abominations, nothing would ever inure him to them. He could only face each battle with the resolve and courage of the Ultramarines, as laid down in the ordinances of the Codex Astartes by the Primarch of the Ultramarines, Rebute Gilliman, himself, centuries before. A unit of Tyranid warriors emerged from the slavering Ripper swarms to confront the warriors. As Rios watched, a bone sword sliced down through the ceramite shoulder pad of one Space Marine's power armour, severing the skin and sinews underneath. As soon as the serrated edge connected with flesh, the nerve tendrils within the bone sword delivered a potent psychic jolt to the warrior's body. The stun would only be momentary, but it was long enough for the Tyranid, howling in triumph, to remove the man's head from his shoulders with its second blade. Striding behind the charging Tyranid warriors, lording it over his swarm, the Hive Queen's consort came into view. The Hive Tyrant was a truly terrifying figure to behold. A monster stood over 2 meters tall, and its presence exuded a malign intelligence that filled the Ultramarines with dread. Rapid bursts of laser energy struck the Hive Tyrant, but to no effect. The monstrosity's toughened carapace absorbed the lethal blasts. With unintelligible roars, and no doubt telepathic signals as well, the master of the swarm directed the broods to seek out the humans and destroy them, consuming all available biomass in the process as well. The tyrant had to die. Kilometers overhead, thrusters fired, desperately turning the vast spacecraft on its axis. But it was too late. The gauntlet of Macragge collided violently with the asteroid-sized pod launched from the hive ship. The massive spore mine detonated with the power of a thermonuclear explosion, the resultant shockwave shaking the spaceship. Chunks of bone-like shell as thick as a fortress wall bombarded the craft.
I don't know why all of
Some
sudden,
shards disintegrated as they struck the vessel's force field,
bones
but the shields had been damaged by the initial explosion and provided only intermittent protection. Other fragments struck the vast ship like meteors, wrecking communications antennae and tearing holes in its hull through which the accompanying shower of acids, algae and virus-bearing particles could gain access to the craft's interior.
Well, it looks like I've gained
The
control
Imperial
of this planet,
navigators
although I'm
reacted
worried for
swiftly,
how much
bringing the
longer
6
it
kilometre long vessel under control. Fission boosters firing, the gauntlet of Macragge moved off in pursuit of the bioship. The prehistoric world, resting 600 metres below, appeared as a welcoming blue-green paradise, its atmosphere streaked with wisps of white clouds, a total contrast to the smog-polluted planets, which were, so often, the refuges of humanity. Jeroth's airless moon, no more than a planetoid, that had become trapped by the larger astral body's gravitational pull, rose over the glowing nimbus of the planet. Then, the stricken bioship came into view. From the bridge of the Ultramarines' flagship, Commander Darius watched through the view screen as the gauntlet of Macragge closed in on the Tyranid craft. The gigantic curled body of the creatures being disgorged from the bioship's gaping, hangar-wide mouth. On my mark, hit that abomination with everything we've got, the commander ordered the soldiers at their control consoles. Returning to his throne of command, Darius sat down, never once taking his stern gaze from the monstrosity displayed before him on the view screen. His brow furrowed. Fire! 100 turbo lasers blazed into life, great beams of intensely focused light energy striking the already weakened Tyranid mothership. In a blaze of coruscating fire, the Nautilus shell of the massive space-travelling organism splintered, mountainous shards flying from the creature and its soft internal organs rupturing as its body depressurized. Its 100-kilometre-long innards spilling into space. The great creature dropped away from the cruiser as it was caught in Jarof's gravitational field. The bioship plunged towards the planet's surface through the atmosphere, its shattered shell glowing red hot. As Darius watched, the organism began to burn, its pink flesh cooking as it hurtled planetward. The Terminator squad moved cautiously through the undergrowth with the grizzled Sergeant Bellator at its head. The Space Marines covered the jungle in front of them and to either side with sweeps of their guns, monitoring their motion sensors for signs of potential hostile life.
Nuclear missile installation complete.
The surrounding trees were alive with sound. Unknown bugs clicked and hummed, while mosquito-like insects as long as a man's hand buzzed around the armoured warriors. With the defeat of their hive tyrant, the Tyranid hordes had been thrown into disarray. Pressing home their advantage, the elite warriors of the Imperium had routed the foul alien army. The less determined Termagants and Hormagants had fled immediately, but the rampaging bestial Carnifexes continued to hammer the Space Marine ranks. Even when its fellows lay dead around it, one of the Screamer killers relentlessly charged a Razorback. Smashing into the tank, the alien horror scythed through the plasteel armour, its razor-edged killing arms flailing. A living engine of destruction, the Carnifex had gutted the vehicle and slaughtered its crew before it was felled by a bombardment of missiles from an Ultramarine's whirlwind. There was a screeching cry from deep within the trees to the right of the Terminator's path. Sergeant Bellator fired off several rounds from his Stormbolter into the foliage. All was quiet again. Precautionary fire! Bellator's growling voice came over the Terminator's comm units. It could be a Tyranid. Had it been a Tyranid? Rios wondered. It could just have been one of Jarof's indigenous life forms. There was no way of knowing. With the main Tyranid force wiped out, the Terminators had been sent into the jungle to carry out a clean-up operation. With the Hive Tyrant gone, many of the Tyranid troops had gone rogue, randomly attacking Space Marines that far outnumbered them, or fled into the primeval jungles where it was harder for the Ultramarines to follow.
Good.
Although the Tyranids had been defeated, the veteran squad was still tense with anticipation. The Ultramarines' lines were miles away, and out here, in the depths of the jungle, they were as much the aliens as the Tyranids.
Nuclear missile armed.
There's something up ahead, Brother Julius said, breaking the communication silence. The others checked their motion sensors. Several red blips had appeared at the outer limit of the small displays.
Missiles are ready to fire.
Be ready, brothers, the squad sergeant hissed. The fronds gave way to a clearing. On the far side of the glade was the crumpled fuselage of an Ultramarines Thunderhawk gunship. It was instantly obvious to the veterans what had happened. A broad hole gaped in the side of an engine housing. Its edges were corroded, with an acidic slime, and splinters of bone were lodged in the plasteel hull around it. The living cannon of a biovore had fulfilled its deadly purpose, having been fatally hit by the spore mine. Its crew no longer able to control it, the aircraft had come down on the forested plateau. A second path through the jungle showed where the Thunderhawk, its engines burning, had seared through the trees. It had flattened everything in its wake until it ploughed into the clearing, the soft soil thrown up around it, putting out the fires. But what had happened to the crew? Spread out, Bellator instructed, and the Terminators immediately began to take up appropriate positions around the crashed craft. The blips were still present on their motion sensors. From the readings, Rios could see that almost all the organisms were actually inside the downed gunship. As yet, however, the Terminators had not made visual contact with them.
Armed.
Were they the injured crew? Tyranids
Missiles are
were
ready to
denizens
fire.
native to the
Enemy
planet.
orbital lasers
Were they
sighted.
hostile or totally harmless? As if in answer, Rios heard his sergeant's voice again, over the comm unit. Expect the worst. Cautiously, the squad strode across the glade, the servo assists in their cumbersome suits whirring, closing in on the Thunderhawk with every step. When the craft had gone down, it had probably been assumed that the crew had perished. However, it was just as likely that the crash would have gone unnoticed to the Ultramarines' commanders, as wave after wave of mycetic spores hurtled down onto the teeming battlefield.
Unit cannon is
Whatever the case, a rescue attempt had not been ordered. From Rios's motion sensors, it appeared that the creatures inside the Thunderhawk had stopped moving. Were they aware of the Terminators approaching them? There were too many blips for it to be any surviving crew members, the Marine convinced himself. But were they Tyranids?
Unit cannon is
Brother Hastus was the first to reach the crumpled fuselage.
armed.
He edged his way towards the open cargo bay hatchway as the others covered him.
Missiles are ready to fire.
Several seconds dragged by
tell
as
these
Hestus
two,
checked the interior of the cargo
Enemy
bay.
helmet
A
sighted.
wave of his power
Sustaining
fist
damage.
and the rest of the squad moved in. Rios followed Brother Syracuse into the shadowy interior of the crashed Thunderhawk, the optical sensors in his helmet adjusting from the glare of the clearing to the gloom instantly. Lightning claws raised, Syracuse advanced slowly through the gunship, brushing aside dangling pipes that dripped oily fluid into the chamber. Rios glanced down at his motion sensor and then immediately looked up at the ceiling in alarm. A six-limbed insectoid nightmare dropped out of the darkness. His reflexes working far faster than conscious thought, the Ultramarine automatically raised his power fist to protect himself. The creature hit its crackling distortion field and screamed as its carapace shattered. It fell squirming onto the floor behind Rios. Julius stepped over it, thrusting a whirring chain fist into its face. Then, another of the purple-skinned monstrosities was on his back. Gene stealers. His worst fears had been confirmed. Before he could train his weapon on the Tyranid construct and blow its vile carcass apart, the monster plunged a talon claw through the back of Julius's armor. It yanked it out again, dragging with it the man's spine, slick with blood. A hail of armor-piercing shells from Rios's bolter punched through the Gene Stealer's exoskeleton, and the alien's corpse joined that of Brother Julius on the floor of the cargo bay.
Unit cannon sighted.
Something heavy slammed into Rios, sending his heavy armoured body sprawling on the metal floor with a resounding clang. Gripping his left arm between its vice-like jaws, another hissing Gene Stealer was trying to bite through the ceramite shell to get to the flesh within. The creature was swiftly dispatched with a bullet to the temple, but even in death the Gene Stealer's jaws refused to release their grip. Several more shots shattered the creature's skull, allowing Rios to extract his arm.
Missiles are ready to fire.
To his left, Brother Syracuse was grappling with two of the Tyranid creatures, one gripped in each fist. A jet of orange flame illuminated the cargo bay as Brother Hestus kept yet more of the creatures from approaching his overwhelmed fellows. Rios clambered to his feet, shaking the Gene Stealer's blood from his suit. Brother Bellator stood in the open hatchway, assailed on all sides by the rest of the Gene Stealer brood, defending himself as best he could at such close quarters with his power sword. The savagery and ferocity of the Gene Stealers was terrifying. His storm bolter blasting, Rios rushed to the sergeant's aid. Another flare from Brother Hestus's flamer struck the frenzied press of purple bodies surrounding Bellator, and the reek of burning alien flesh filled the chamber. With a sizzling flash, an oily puddle ignited, the flames rushing back through the cargo bay, following the trail of black liquid to where it cascaded from a broken fuel pipe.
Sustaining damage.
Syracus's horrified gaze followed the progress of the fire, his chain fist still embedded in the metal wall through the skull of a twitching Gene Stealer.
Ragnarok, Doomsday Titan
Rios reached the edge of the hatchway,
Annihilation.
and the overwhelmed sergeant as the Thunderhawk's fuel tanks erupted in a conflagration of molten metal and oily smoke. The force of the explosion threw the ultramarine out of the cargo bay, flinging him right across the
Noise is
clearing.
not good.
Rios' body slammed into a thick tree trunk. The unconscious Terminator slumped to the ground, and the weight of his heavy armour
That
embedding
noise
his
was,
body
me
in the
about to
soft
lose and rage quit.
flames engulfed
So,
the wreckage of the gunship.
Um,
Rios opened his eyes slowly, his vision taking a few seconds to focus. Before him were the wooden beams and the underside of a thatched roof.
so let's
Cautiously,
things.
he tilted his head to
So
one
we've got
side.
this planet. This
"Hello,"
planet cannot be a
said a
weapon.
small voice.
Got that planet.
Sitting
That
only a
planet
few
will
feet
turn
from
to-
him was a human
This
child,
planet.
her keen blue eyes regarding him with intense fascination. She wore a simple smock, and her waist-length auburn hair hung in a plait over her one shoulder.
Unit cannon is full.
"Hello," Rios mumbled in reply. His tongue felt thick, and there was a taste of stale saliva in his mouth. "My name's Melina," the child girl said. "What's yours?"
Missile launcher online.
Still only half conscious, Rios tried to focus on the girl's question so that he could provide an answer, but he couldn't. A nebulous fog obscured that part of his memory from him. "I don't know," he muttered, bewildered. "Where am I?" "You're at home, in our house. Why don't you know your name?" Ignoring the girl's question, Rios scanned the room from where he lay. It was small and Spartan. The only other furniture in it apart from the bed was a chair and a small table on which rested a wash basin. Lying on his back
like
in a
this
rough
ready
wooden
to
bed, he could feel the straw mattress beneath him. "You do have a name, don't you?" The girl persisted. "Come away now, Melina. Let our visitor rest." Rios swiveled to find the source of this second voice.
Nuclear
A
missiles
man had entered the room. He also wore plain peasant clothes, and although only in his 30s, Rios judged he had already begun to lose his hair. "You must be tired," the man added, addressing Rios himself.
Forces are under attack.
"We will leave you in peace." "No." Rios found himself demanding, something of the old authority in his voice returning. "What happened to me?" "You don't know?" the man asked, incredulously. "Are you not a warrior
No, that's not
of the Emperor himself,
Never mind.
fallen from the stars?" Rios stared at the man with incomprehension. "Am I? How did I get here?"
Nuke missiles are
"We
ready
saw
to
the stars
fire.
falling to the earth and knew it was an omen. The menfolk set off into the untamed lands as our elders instructed. We found you in the forest. You were unconscious and badly injured." The man explained patiently.
None of
"We
these
brought you
planets
back
have
to
been
my
turned
farm
into a
and did what we could for you.
kiddie thing.
At first we were not sure if you would survive, but your holy armor had helped to keep you alive.
Nuclear missile
You have
armed.
been asleep for almost a week." Desperately, Rios tried to clear the fog from his mind and piece together his shattered memories. He could remember nothing clearly from before the moment when he had been awoken. There were only trace images of terrible, unreal monsters and the distant sounds of battle, like the last lingering fragments of a nightmare that were forgotten with the coming of dawn. Who am I? What am I? Rios' voice was no longer aggressive and demanding, more like that of a pitiful child.
Destroyed.
The man and his daughter looked at him sadly. "I'm sorry," the man spoke wistfully. "We can heal your body as best we can, but we cannot minister to your mind. We cannot help you to remember. That is something that you will have to do yourself, given time." A sorrowful silence descended over the room for several minutes. Nobody moved. "You saved me," Rios finally said, humbly. The man smiled.
Nuke
"Then I know
missiles
what
are
I
ready
must
to
do,"
fire.
Rios continued.
Anti-nuke missiles
"I owe
are
you
ready.
my life, so now I must repay the debt. I pledge myself to your
Returning
service.
Ah,
I will do
good. We've got
whatever
a,
you wish."
A thingy.
Rios
Umbrella
tried to
it's
sit
called.
up,
That's
and
its
immediately,
name.
white-hot daggers of pain shot through his body. His face a mask of agony. He collapsed back onto the bed. "You must rest,"
Go.
the man chided gently. "Tomorrow is another day, and then we shall see." Every day, Jaren the farmer and his family tended to Rios's needs, bringing him his meals and seeing to his injuries. The little girl, Melina, was a constant companion. The time Rios spent with the child, hearing of her youthful adventures or helping her with her letters, filled him with joy and gave him new strength to face the long haul to recovery ahead. But it was not to be a long recovery. Within days, his wounds had healed as if they had never been. He was able to leave his bed and walk again. He began helping out around the farmhouse where he could. Jaren and his family, along with the other villagers, were in awe of Rios's restorative power. The injuries he had suffered would have taken a mortal man months to recover from, if he did at all. Truly, he is a warrior from the stars, the people said, and heaped blessings upon the Emperor for sending them a saviour. Yet each day, Rios still came no closer to resolving his own internal struggles, no nearer to remembering who he was or where he came from. Only a fortnight after his arrival at the farm, Rios was able to set to work in the fields. Jaren and his family were the owners of a few tidy acres at the edge of a village which consisted of nothing more than a collection of farms, a mill, and a local tavern. During the following months, he learnt much about the people of the village and their customs. They spent most of their days toiling in the fields in order to raise crops from the unforgiving land. It appeared that the humans fought a constant battle with their surrounding jungle, the untamed lands, as the farmers called them. Wherever trees were cleared to provide some land for growing cereal crops or to graze animals, the primeval forest reclaimed an acre left fallow on the farm's boundary. Weeds seemed to grow more readily than wheat, and much of the village's time was spent clearing them from their fields. It seemed like the forest didn't want the humans there and was trying to evict its unwelcome tenants. Rios joined Jaren and his family in their own battle with the jungle. He would be the first up at dawn, taking a mighty axe to the twisting trunks, and the last to return to the farmhouse at dusk. The other villagers marvelled at the Starman, as they called him, for his strength was many times that of the other humans. Soon, he was also helping the other farmers, single-handedly repairing broken wagons and erecting barns for the grain harvest. There was not one person amongst the village who did not welcome Rios's assistance. But for all he learned about the resilient, magnanimous people who had taken him in, he was still no wiser as to his own origins. Perhaps, he began to think, the villagers were right, that he had been sent from the stars in order to help these kind people in their plight. This growing conviction was strengthened by news that came to Jaren's farm one chill morning. A small party of farmers arrived at Jaren's door, out of breath and in a state of agitation. Jaren and the farmers spent a few minutes in anxious conference before turning to Rios. "What is it?" Rios asked, concerned. "Last night, old man Hosk's place was attacked by something that came out of the forest. Hosk died trying to defend his home, but his wife and children escaped." Jaren paused, as if he hardly believed what he was about to reveal himself. "They say it was a monster as big as a house, and with the strength of a giant. And then there were the terrible, unearthly screams heard outside Kilm's farm during the night. This morning, Kilm found his entire herd slaughtered in the fields, and his grain store razed to the ground. Everyone in the village is too terrified to go after the beast.
You mean
They
not
want you to
destroy
hunt the
it?
monster down for them and
Fuck
kill it.
you.
You're the only one who can kill the
Bastard.
screamer, Starman."
If I had sang
One
that,
of the
I'd have
petitioners
been
added.
annoyed.
"You will help us, won't you?" The Screamer. The name troubled Rios. He was certain that he had heard it before, and that it spelled danger. Despite his unease, however, now was his chance to repay these people for their kindness and fulfill his purpose. "Of course I will." Taking up his axe, Rios left the farm with Jaren and the other villagers and headed for what remained of the Hosk homestead. At the head of the valley in which the ruined farm lay, he saw that the farmers' descriptions of the devastation had not been exaggerated. Most of the buildings had been demolished as if something huge had ploughed straight through the wattle walls. Suddenly, the uneasy quiet of the morning was broken by a blood-curdling, high-pitched, bestial scream that cut through Rios like a knife. "What was that?" he demanded, turning to the crowd of farmers huddled behind him. "That was the screamer," one of them replied nervously. The howling beast emerged from the line of trees on the far side of the valley, although still over a couple of kilometres away. Thanks to his enhanced eyesight, Rios was able to make out the monster quite clearly. He saw the bleached, bone-like dome of its head, the great curved arms, the crushing hooves, the tough, chitinous hide. Instantly, Rios's mind was awash with terrifying images and recalled sensations. Slavering jaws, burning acid death, stinging tentacles, blood-drenched talons, fetid, decay-ridden breath. A nightmare of purple and crimson. It was as if someone had opened the floodgates that had been holding back his memory. Temporarily stunned as forgotten experiences came crashing back into his mind, all Rios could do was stand stock still, staring at the beast that had banished his amnesia. "What is it, Starman?" Jaren asked. "No, not that. Rios. I am Rios," the Space Marine mumbled, shaking his head as if coming out of a troubled dream. "I know who I am, what I am." His thoughts and words became more focused and determined. "I know where my destiny and duty lie. Where is my armor? Where are my weapons?" Hefting aside the bales of straw, Jaren uncovered the trapdoor set into the floor of the barn. "I always thought that one day you would ask for it back. When we found you, it was encrusted with dried blood and in condition not befitting a warrior of the Emperor. I cleaned and polished it, then laid it here, together with your mighty weapons for safekeeping." The farmer raised the trapdoor to reveal the glooming blue armor that lay there. The Space Marine held up the helmet, a shaft of sunlight catching its whiteness in the dust-shot beam. Reverently, Rios removed each piece of the centuries-old Terminator armor from its resting place. As he did so, his gaze lingered on the badges of honor won through decades of conflict on 100 worlds. Pride welled up within him as he took in every crack and inscribed line of the great stone icon fixed to the left shoulder pad. Only the most honored of the Emperor's veterans wore the Crux Terminatus. The winged skull carved into the chestplate of the armor attested to the righteous victory against the enemies of humanity. The purity seals granted him by the chapter's chaplains was still intact too. Its blessings had certainly not proved wanting for Rios. It had kept him alive, while the rest of his squad had been condemned to death as a result of the accursed Tyranid's intervention
where my
at the
nukes are
Thunderhawk.
going.
He would never fight at their side again. The coming challenge he was to face would be as much for them as for the Emperor and the people of this unforgiving planet. "I would like to be alone now," the Space Marine said, turning to Jaren. "I must prepare for battle."
Someone managed to be shot
As
down.
Rios strode out of the barn, he looked nothing like the man that had entered. His mortal frame was encased within the metal body of a Terminator, and mighty he looked indeed. He had donned the armour of his ancestors and chanted the litanies of war. Now he was ready to confront his foe. He addressed the overawed farmers gathered outside the barn. "This day, I go to face my destiny." "Will you return?" Jaren asked. Rios turned his helmeted head towards the horizon. These people had shown him such compassion, hospitality, and friendship. Now he could finally repay his debt to them. If the Emperor wills it. If not, my death will serve the greater good. "What is your name, warrior?" "I am Brother Rios of the First Company of the Ultramarines chapter of the Imperium. May it never fail." "Then farewell, Brother Rios. May the Emperor's spirit go with you, as do our blessings." Rios saluted the man who had done so much for him, then paused before departing. "Jaren, will you do something for me?" "Of course, my friend. Name it."
remember me. With that, the Ultramarine turned his back on humanity and strode off down the track, away from the farm, towards the primeval jungle, to meet his destiny.
Well, there's the
Probably
next
was
force.
froze. Then it was again. A rustling in the undergrowth ahead of him. He checked his motion sensor. There was definitely something there. But was it his quarry? Or yet another tree fox? He had hunted the beast for 3 solid days without resting.
Oops.
Having followed its tracks from the ravaged farmstead,
Oh, hello,
they
Henry.
now lay many
I'll go
miles
on to the
behind him.
Missiles are ready to fire.
With a bellowing scream, the Carnifex broke through the tangle of fronds before him.
Hello.
All
I'm
4 of
live,
its
don't say fuck all, bugger.
Yeah, I know you're live.
I know.
I'll
That's,
put a message in chat.
but I'm just making it super explicit that I'm definitely live right now. Don't say anything about... well, actually, let's not even talk about people and recently departed and where the afterlife.
Yeah.
Even though I really want to mention somebody's name, and I think my audience will understand. Speaking of my audience, Living the Dream.
I don't know what you're on about.
Oh, I'll tell you off the air. The name begins with Sue and ends with Anne. But anyway, speaking of my audience, Living the Dream says, "Have I ever seen Living with Wolves?" I've just started watching it. Have you seen it? It's by Ridley Scott.
I saw the Discovery series Living with Wolves. That was quite interesting.
No, this is well, it's Ridley
Yeah, but it's
Scott.
Ridley Scott though, isn't it?
It's Ridley Scott, so it's deeply satanic. Without spoiling it, 2 androids.
It's Ridley Scott. I think I've noticed the Emperor's got no clothes on now, and I think it's quite like... So
Yeah.
it's Ridley Scott.
Well, in this case, 2 androids raise up a group of children to be atheist, and they're on a new, strange planet, and they want to be atheist because...
It sounds like it was written by Harry Harrison.
To be honest, it does feel like one of those sort of like, you know,
I found the
religion
Harry
is the
Harrison book
bad.
was really good as young on my desk.
So yeah, I'm intrigued by it. Although they aren't
I
doing
found
the
my
thing
Harry
of
Harrison book.
Lim
It's
magical.
the best of Harry Harrison, and it's got that awful Streets of Ashkelon in it.
Oh, does it have the stainless steel wrap?
It's short stories, so Space Rat to the CCC.
Nuclear launch detected.
Yeah. Sorry, you're not selling it for me. I enjoyed the stainless steel wrap.
Brave Newer World. that's 75% different from Brave New World.
Well, I think it's like National Lampoon's Dune.
Let's see if I'll find the end of Streets of Ashkelon. I'll read the real cringe ending.
Nuclear missiles armed. Nuclear missile installation complete.
Interdimensional Lizard says hello, or at least he will do.
How come your chat's not moving for me?
It's not moving for me either.
Oh, okay.
I'm just predicting the future now. I'm using my Kwisatz Haderach powers.
Nuclear missiles are ready to fire.
Basically, he gives them the Bible, so then they just start crucifying everyone.
Yeah,
because that's in the
book.
Bible.
Yeah, there's a book called
You read that?
Hyperion, which
You
one
read
of
that?
Hugo
Sorry.
put, and it's crap. Apparently, my simulation speed's running at 100%, but this looks like there's a lot of stuttering in
Well,
it.
basically, you've got the hero atheist trader, and he's trying to tell the Virgin missionary, don't give them the Bible, they'll get it all wrong. and then the brave, intelligent atheist is proven correct.
Wow. I could not have foreseen this happening.
It's a tale about a brave atheist trying to teach the stupid Christians.
Brave Sir Atheist, he bravely ran away.
Yes. They just love atheists.
Brave Sir Robin, he bravely ran away.
They're just so, aren't they?
What?
Atheists, they're just so fucking annoying, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, this, like I said, this Ridley Scott thing, deeply satanic.
Is it satanic, or is it just atheist, or is it just without God?
No, there is a religious faction, but rather than being Christian and anything else, they're Mithra, because I suppose they can get away with it. I suppose if it's by Ridley Scott, maybe he wrote it to be that way. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. He's lost the plot. Alien was all right. James Cameron improved it.
He certainly did. But he's knighted as well, Ridley Scott, and I just think to myself, people like Jimmy Savile and Ridley Scott get knighthoods, and it tells you all you
His
need to
brother
know
was
about.
better. His brother Tony Scott, I think he used to do like really dumb action films. Hold on, let's see if I can find Tony Scott.
Forces are taking fire.
IMDb. I'm sure Tony Scott is like one of those ones, like, yeah, fucking kick-ass, like, decent films.
Although I can't have any of those.
Producer, director. Here we go. His directorial credits. Let's start with the oldest first. Oh, The Hunger. I haven't seen that one. That sounds like a vampire film.
Unit cannon is
Top
full.
Gun. Directed Top Gun. Beverly Hills Cop 2.
Unit cannon is full.
Well, those are good
Unit
films.
cannon is full.
Days of Thunder. Not so much.
I mean, I thought
I'm
you were
reading
going
out
to
the
say he
best
was going to do like some horror films or like Trauma Tier.
No, Tony Scott used to do really good action films. Last Boy Scout. That's a really good film. That is.
Yeah.
True Romance. Crimson Tide.
Unit cannon is full.
Who directed True Lies?
Unit cannon is full.
That was Cameron, wasn't it? James
Unit cannon is
Cameron.
full.
Oh yeah.
Unit cannon is
The
full.
Fan, Enemy of the State.
Unit cannon is full.
Oh,
Man
Enemy
on
of the
Fire,
State's
that's a good
great.
film.
That's a
Nuclear
really good
missile
film.
armed.
Yeah,
Unit
so there you go.
cannon is
So
full.
Ridley Scott is the lesser Scott brother.
Unit cannon is
Yeah,
full.
like Piers and Jeremy
Unit
Corbyn.
cannon is full.
And
Nuclear
I don't know.
missiles
I
are
have to
ready
work
to
out which
fire.
one's the lesser of the
Nuclear
Hitchens
missiles
brothers.
armed.
I
Nuclear
mean, Pete
missiles are
Hitchens
ready
is a
to fire.
miserable cunt, but Christopher Hitchens is an atheist, so...
Nuke missiles are ready to fire. Nuclear launch detected.
You know, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, really.
Yeah. So there you go. Tony Scott, the bet. I think Ridley Scott. I think he's just.
Hi,
like, he
I'm
looks
Barry
pomp on it.
Scott, and I am the director of the greatest advert of all time.
I'm Barry Scott, and I'm the third Ridley Scott brother.
I am the best of the Scott brothers.
Missile armed.
I'm not even related to them, and I am the best.
I'm the Charlie Cray of the Ridley Scott brothers.
Forces taking fire.
Wouldn't it be great if Barry Scott was related to Ridley?
Oh
and Tony
yeah,
Scott?
they just like they go to the and they're like Ridley Scott's trying to do like a speech for Christmas, and Barry Scott goes, "I have made a fantastic turkey. Let's carve it now."
And Barry Scott's the favourite Scott brother.
Why
And
can't
the
you
other two
be
are really
more
put
like
out
your
about
brother
it.
Barry?
Why don't you love us, Mum? We've done some really good films. Well, I have. Ridley hasn't.
What sort of name's Ridley anyway? Or what are you going to call him? Paul, Steve, Gary, Thomas? Nah, Ridley.
maybe Maybe his mum was weeing a lot when she was pregnant with him.
Oh, speaking of which, I think Gandhi's Revenge is doing a number on... I've not been right since yesterday.
Celestial bodies orbit.
Do you have an
alternate.
Indian?
No, I don't know what it is, but I reckon it's something in the water because my
I thought it was
mate...
called Montezuma's Revenge anyway.
Yeah, but I don't live anywhere near Mexico, and I do live near Indians.
Yeah.
My mate, who lives in a town not far from me, he also is suffering this. And he says he hasn't had the squirts in years.
Oh, okay then. There was a bug going round, weren't there?
Well, that's it. They're spraying us. I like how it says simulation performance is 100%, but it's clearly lagging like a bitch. I guess this is where you're supposed to complete it by now, but I've been... Wow, that's it. Maybe I should build some Titans on the enemy planet.
Unit cannon is full. Unit cannon is full. Unit cannon is full. Nuke missiles are ready to fire. Unit
Right, I'm
cannon
going to
is
establish
full.
a beachhead on this planet.
Nuke missiles are ready to
It's going to be
fire.
mine now.
What are you playing?
Planetary Annihilation.
Nuclear missile armed.
I'm doing one of the boss battles, you see, so it's a bit
Missiles are
harder
ready to
than
fire.
a usual match.
Celestial bodies orbit altered.
Oh shit! That's not good news.
What?
They're going to smash a planet into my planet. I need to get out of here and quick.
I think
Actually, just a
Phoenix
sec.
is off the table into my point and right in your face. Do you remember that one? Dave Cinzano Bianco Lister. Planetary Pool.
Yes, that's it. Okay, I found out where they're doing.
That little blue planet is you're ripping the felt. The little blue planet's off into somebody's pint of beer.
Yep, you got it. Oh, so it's not this one that's been converted.
Have you watched what's the Carpenter movie that's supposed to be the inspiration for
Dark Star?
Red Dwarf? Yeah, you watched Dark Star?
Yeah.
I've watched it.
They're having a philosophical argument with a bomb, and it's like, but I want to detonate. It's my raison d'être. It's like, yeah, but if you
I saw
do
a
that,
bit.
we all die. It's like,
So that sounds a little bit like Talkie Toast, then, doesn't it?
Talkie
and there's the
Toaster.
rolling, and there's the beach ball thing,
yeah.
isn't there?
Well, it kind of is Talkie Toaster. Right, okay, come on.
Yeah.
Right, wormholes established. So now get to the other
Ah,
one.
you're a waffle man.
No, I don't want any smegging waffles, no crumpets, no tea cakes, no toast. Right, I've got to get to this other planet. Oh, I wish I could send my construction aircraft through, but alas I can't.
Arriving at new buyer.
What did you put them together for after the accident? That was no accident. That was first degree toaster side.
I like that they had, what's his name on there. Fuck's sake, where's my, like, orbital aircraft?
You know
This-
the voice of Talkie Toaster was?
Yeah, it's the first,
The voice of the original Crichton.
yeah.
Under attack.
Yeah, I know I'm under attack. That's why I want you to...
Asteroid annihilated.
Right, well,
On the planet annihilated.
there goes the planet with all my stuff on it. So, Oh, the simulation speed's improved somewhat.
So where do you think Red Dwarf went over the edge and became shit?
Probably when the two writers split up with one another over creative differences.
So what series was... I thought... No, that wasn't till after it was over, though, was it?
Was it? I don't know.
No, I don't think that was till after it was over. So, like, Red Dwarf 10 is just Rob Grant, isn't it? Because I think it's just Rob Grant that does the writing now, isn't it?
Is it?
Yeah.
Cool. So I'll have a look in the chronocam later to
He
see.
did a really, really good book called Colony. I've had 2 copies of it and lost both of them. It was a really, really funny book. It's about a guy who's having a really shit run of luck. And then he ends up on a generational spaceship. But he ends up in a robot body on a generational spaceship. And he's got to teach these really dumb kids how to run a spaceship. Even though he doesn't really know that much himself.
Yeah.
Asteroid annihilated.
No way.
Desert planet annihilated.
No way.
What's happened?
Oh, no, I refuse. No, not gonna lose. I have the chronocam. They smashed the other asteroid into the planet I escaped to.
Bastards.
Not if I can fucking help it.
Lava planet annihilated.
Right. So what I've got to do?
Desert planet annihilated.
You still alive?
Because I've used the chronocam and I'm rewinding time. And I'm going to escape to the one place where they dare not destroy, because that's where their bloody commander is. Right. So. Right. Here's my. So I immediately need to go. World simulation went away.
Oh, Fries, don't say fuck or bugger up, it's live.
We have been annihilated.
You fuck!